Let's talk about yesterday's loss. So welcome into an at-home edition of the Browns Report. Matthew Peterson here, following Cleveland's truly was a disastrous performance against the Houston Texans. So we're going to kind of talk about what went wrong. We'll kind of start the show off with that, and then we'll transition to offseason mode, right? What do the Browns need to do this offseason? What are their strategies and targets and free agency in the draft? Who are they going to let walk? Who are they going to bring back? So we're going to cover all that on this home edition of the show. I'm off today, but there's no way I'm not going to talk about the Browns after their loss yesterday. So let's start with talking about the loss, and then we'll kind of put it behind us, but not completely. I don't think this was a matter of the Browns being rusty. I know I've seen a lot of people talk about they rested all their guys in week 18 and look what happened. Well, imagine if they didn't rest their guys and Myles Garrett got hurt. How different the tune would be. But we can never prove that because it's impossible to prove. If the Browns truly were rusty and that's why they lost this game, I don't think they would have had a lead in the end of the first and the start of the second quarter, whenever they were up by 14-10, right? If they were rusty, they would have gone down 14-0, and that would be that. So I think the rust element more favors the first quarter of the game. And the Browns were very much in this. They had a lead in the beginning of the game. So I don't think this is a matter of rustiness, okay? The Browns simply picked the absolute worst day possible to have the worst game of the season. I mean, I'm literally going back all the way to the preseason when they were tying the Eagles because Cade York couldn't make a field goal, right? All the way until the wild card game. This was, without a doubt, their worst game of the season. They played worse yesterday than they did against the Ravens in week 4, against the Seahawks on the road, against the Broncos and the Rams on the road. They were, without a doubt, worse on Saturday than all those games. And that's a bummer. And that is simply just, I wouldn't say luck of the draw, but that's sports. Like, sometimes you're on, sometimes you're not. There's not a whole bunch of analytics you need to dive into here. Everyone that's ever played any sort of competition at any sort of level knows you have good days and you have bad days. The Browns had a bad day, and the Texans had a great day. And that's what really compounded this issue and made the score so jarring, 45-14. The Texans played, without a doubt, their best game of the season. They had some very nice wins throughout the year, like the Colts in week 18. They had some great moments. They took down the Steelers at home. They went to Jacksonville and won. But they played better on Saturday than they had played in any other game this season. So you put those two things together, and you have the Browns losing by 30 points. So that's how I kind of how I look at this. Are there things that should be looked at and dived into in this game? Yes. This is not a game where, this is what I said in my post-game show yesterday, where you burn the tape. You put it behind you and you go, hey, just not a good day, we'll move on from this. No. You go back and you watch this. You learn from this because there is plenty to learn from. The big thing I want to learn from is, why was the Browns defense so bad on the road this year compared to at home? I felt like the last couple of road games, they had started to get into a bit of a groove kind of after that Broncos-Rams road trip, but the road defense definitely showed out on Saturday, and it was a disaster. C.J. Stroud was, I haven't looked at the pressure numbers, but I felt like the pocket was collapsing at times, but they never really got close to him. Like, they never got a hand on him. There were not many plays where it felt like the Browns and Myles Garrett was just like a quarter second away from either getting a strip sack versus a big completion down the field. But the big issue I had with the defense was the secondary. The guys were just running wide open, which is why I don't want to hear anyone complain about the referees. Yes, they botched the call with the no call against David Njoku, and that was not defensive pass interference really against Ronnie Hickman. That one's a little bit more 50-50. But the referees were not the ones guarding Nico Collins and John Mechie and Dalton Schultz and all those guys who were 5 yards more or open. Like, the secondary, and we don't need to go name by name. You probably saw which guys were the closest to players being wide open. They just had an awful day. And that sucks because they had been so good all year long. And they were healthy, like Denzel Ward was out there, healthy-ish, I guess, but the secondary just choked. Like, that to me is the biggest takeaway from this game. Now, let's talk about what's next. And before we do that, I do want to just toss this question your way. I kind of want to get a pulse, as I like to say, on what everyone is feeling. Do you still believe in this team? Right? And when I say this team, I don't mean the Cleveland Browns just in general, but like this locker room. Because you're going to see some new faces. Some guys are going to leave. Some guys are going to come back. But overall, in the core pieces of this team, right, from Deshaun Watson to Myles Garrett to Denzel Ward to Grant Delpit to Amari Cooper to Nick Chubb to Joel Paterno, the guys who are making the most money on this team, do you believe in the pillars and the foundation of this team still? Yes or no? So let's talk about what's next here. And before we do that, actually, I do want to bring up something that I saw on Twitter. I guess now Offseason Chops, who's a great Twitter follow, had a really good point, and I want to share with you guys. And that was, look at how the Ravens responded from last year to this year. Last year, they were decimated with injuries. They didn't have Lamar Jackson in a road playoff game, similar to the Browns. They lost that road playoff game. And they came back in 2023 and were the best team in the AFC. They got the 1 seed. They stayed healthy-ish. They lost some guys throughout the year. But it is very doable to bounce back after a very sad road playoff loss when you were decimated by injuries like the Browns were this year and go all the way to the top in the following year. So we're going to find out what this locker room and what this team and what this culture is made of. Are they going to take this loss and go, well, we exceeded expectations and we're happy for that? Or are they going to take this loss and work on their craft and work their tail off this offseason and use it as motivation for next season to come in and go all the way to the top? That's what I'm excited to see. That's what I'm excited to see next season. Because we have seen teams in the NFL, this is what I love about the NFL, is you get so many new playoff teams every single year. If you're getting new playoff teams, that means teams are falling out, right? And you see teams go on big runs and then just fall off the face of the earth the next season. When the Jags were leading in Foxborough in the fourth quarter to go to the Super Bowl, they fell off the face of the earth the next year. The 2018 Chicago Bears, they won the NFC North, fell off the face of the earth the next season or two, right? And it goes on like that. And there's plenty of examples. Last year, the Giants, they won a road playoff game. Okay, they almost not very similar to the way the Cleveland Browns played this year, but an underdog team that no one had a whole bunch of expectations for, won a road playoff game, fell off the face of the earth this year. It happens every single year. Are the Browns going to be that team? Like the Jags kind of last season, although the Jags got really, really injured. But we're going to find out what this locker room is made of. Now let's talk about what's next for the Browns, because Andrew Berry is now on the clock, right? This is where a GM now enters their regular season. A GM's job is to kind of just, I wouldn't say hang out during the season, but their job is from the day after the last game of the season until the start of the next season. That's when they are in season. So what is Andrew Berry going to do this offseason? Well, he's got some needs. He's got some things. He's got some holes to fill. Number one is figure out running back. Figure out whether or not Nick Chubb can either come back and play at least a good enough level where he does not need to go to a 60-40 split, right? Can he pick up where he left off? And if the answer is no, then you need to find a new running back. Not saying you have to move on from Nick Chubb, but you need to find a guy that can take 40 to 50% of the snaps if you cannot trust Nick Chubb to have that big of a workload. I don't know the answer to that question. You don't know the answer to that question. Only the Browns will probably know the answer to that question. And it might not even be today. It might not even be tomorrow, but they have to know before free agency and the draft really gets underway. So that's step one, is you got to figure out what the running back room is going to look like next year, what Nick Chubb is going to look like next year. And if you can't get even 90% of old Nick Chubb, I don't trust Jerome Ford as being a guy that can take 50% of the snaps. This playoff game was a pretty good representation of where the Browns stand with with Jerome Ford. Kareem Hunt had 2 touchdowns in the first half, and they kind of tried to get Ford back in the game, and it didn't work. So figure out the running back position. That's the biggest one right there. Next one, wide receiver. Amari Cooper did a lot of the heavy lifting by himself this year. Elijah Moore finished with 2 touchdowns, I think, and about 650 yards or so. I think we can all agree it was a bit underwhelming. I had bigger expectations for Elijah Moore. Sure, I thought he'd have Deshaun Watson throwing him the rock, and that probably impacted a little bit, but Joe Flacco had no issue throwing the ball all over the field. And he picked his favorites, which were Cooper and Njoku, but Elijah Moore, it was there for the taking. You are the number 2 wide receiver, and the production just simply was not there. So now we start talking about adding to this wide receiver room, because David Bell came on late. Cedric Tillman showed some good weeks at the end. Marquise Goodwin was just doing cardio out there. Like Goodwin, I think, had 2 or 3 grabs all season long. So add to the wide receiver room. Third one, and this one's kind of a stinger, middle linebacker. Now, towards the end of the year, Jim Schwartz primarily ran a nickel defense, right? He was using 2 linebackers and 3 safeties. I don't know if that was out of preference or more so because he didn't have 3 linebackers he trusted on the field for that many snaps. He lost Anthony Walker to a knee injury at the end of the year. He loved JOK at the end of the season. JOK played awesome against the Texans, and he was pretty much the only one on defense that did. And he had Taki, but Walker and Taki came back on 1-year contracts. And Taki was available this year, but unfortunately for Anthony Walker, he has played 3 seasons with the Browns. He has played, just off the top of my head here, 13 games back in 2021, only 3 games in 2022, got hurt on the Monday night game against the Steelers. And then week 3, and this year he played 12 games. So, do you want to bring a walk back? Because he is a big part of this defense. He is the green dot, and this defense is better with him than without him. But if he's not going to be available, and we've gone 3 years of him missing at least about a third, a quarter, or the third of the season, if not more, man, it really makes you wonder if the Browns are just going to run it back again and not learn from the previous 3 years that, unfortunately, it sucks and injuries do stink, but they are a factor of the game, and they are a big decision maker, influence in decision making. Do you want to bring back Anthony Walker? That's a question that the Browns are going to have to wrestle with. And personally, I would start looking to other options. And I don't like that because I think this defense and this team loves Anthony Walker. I know they do, and they want to have him back. But at some point, a business decision has to be made about, are we really going to bring back a guy that we can't count on to play more than 12 or 13 games? I mean, maybe this next year he stays healthy, but how can anyone say that confidently? And then the fourth need is just get healthy, right? Get your starting tackles back. The Texans had no pass rush back in Week 16 on Christmas Eve. The pass rush was there today, and we had freaking Leroy Watson coming in at times. Like, that's how bad it got. Joe Flacco is introducing himself probably in the huddle to Leroy Watson. And no offense to Leroy Watson, but he ain't Jack Conklin, and he ain't DeJuan Jones. So get your tackles back. Get Nick Chubb back. And I guess we'll end with the video with Joe Flacco, but get Deshaun Watson back, get Grant Delpit back, get Anthony Walker, get a starting defense back and healthy, and same more so for the offense and the defense this year. Let's kind of wrap up the video with Joe Flacco. So, Joe, you have won a fan base over that hated your guts. That's an extremely impressive accomplishment because players know in sports that opposing fans are going to hate them, whether they are nice guys or not. That's just the way sports work. But I never thought I would see the day where Browns fans were chanting Flacco. And that day came. And that day is over. If the Browns are interested in bringing Flacco back in a backup role, I guess we can kick the tires on it. I don't think that sends the best message in terms of confidence to Deshaun Watson. I don't know how Watson would feel about it. And I don't know if you should really even care how Watson feels about it. But my guess is Joe Flacco does not want to come back to be a backup. He put some really good tape out there. And aside from 2 pick sixes, which were just backbreaking, he played a pretty good game, I thought, against the Texans. Like, he was accurate with the football. You know, he went into the half with good numbers, and just 2 pick sixes took a game that was already slipping away and just flushed it down the toilet. So I'm ready to have Deshaun Watson come back, and I'm ready for this team to hopefully kind of learn from the successes they had with Joe Flacco and apply that to Deshaun Watson. Because Kevin Stefanski had a lot of success with Flacco, and they were not using the same play calls for Watson as they were with Flacco. So I'm excited to have Deshaun Watson come back healthy and Stefanski learn from, apply his successes from the Flacco era to the Watson 3.0 era, whatever stint this is now, him coming in and out of the lineup and things like that. But let's go. Let's get ready for the offseason. Plenty to improve on, plenty to learn from, plenty to talk about, plenty to do. And we're going to sign off, and we'll see you all later.